3 squad cars, red and blue lights cutting through the Texas dust like angry wasps. That's what greeted me when I pulled my horse trailer up to the gate of my family's ranch after 4 months in Washington, D.C. And there she was, Linda Blackwood, standing behind the deputies with her arms crossed and that smug little smile that said she'd finally won something. The woman was practically vibrating with excitement, bouncing on her designer sneakers like a kid on Christmas morning. The deputy walked over, hat in his hand, looking about as comfortable as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. "Sir, we got ourselves a trespassing complaint. This lady here says you don't belong on this property." I glanced at Linda, then at the weathered iron sign reading Thunder Creek Ranch, Eastern 1889, then back at this woman who'd moved into the new development exactly 87 days ago. I'd been counting, the smell of cattle and sagebrush mixed with diesel exhaust from my truck. Somewhere in the back pasture, I could hear my Angus herd lowing as the sun started setting behind the hills my great-great-grandfather had claimed when this was still Indian territory. "Officer," I said, keeping my voice steady as a church bell, "meet the woman who just called the cops on the guy who investigates HOA fraud for the federal government." Linda's victory smile cracked like ice on a warm pond. "What would you do if some HOA busybody tried to get you arrested on your own family land? Drop your worst neighbor nightmare below and tell me where you're watching from. But first, let me back up and tell you how I ended up in this mess. My name is Jake Thunderheart, and 87 days ago, I buried my daddy on this same red clay soil his great-grandfather broke with an ox and plow back when Oklahoma was still a territory. 4,000 acres of rolling hills, post oak, and the meanest bulls this side of the Red River. Dad left me more than land, though. While I was running cattle and fixing fence posts, I'd been working my way up through the Federal Trade Commission's Consumer Protection Bureau. When the old man passed, I got called up to Washington, D.C. for a promotion, senior investigator for HOA and community association fraud. The irony was about to get thicker than molasses in January. While I was learning how to shut down crooked community boards and nail developers for consumer fraud, my ranch foreman Pete Crowfeather was dealing with our brand new neighbors, Whispering Pines Estates, marketed as authentic Western lifestyle living. Translation: California refugees paying ridiculous money to live next to real cowboys, then spending every waking moment complaining about everything that made it authentic. Enter Linda Blackwood, 52 years old, fresh from winning some epic HOA battle in Marin County, who declared herself Community Standards Director before her moving truck was even unloaded. Pete described her perfectly. She's got the energy of a rabid raccoon, twice the attitude, and about half the common sense. Linda's first week, she drove past our ranch 4 times daily with a notebook, measuring tape, and the determination of a health inspector at a Roach motel. Pete caught her taking pictures of our bulls through the fence, actually documenting their bathroom habits like she was writing her doctoral thesis on bovine waste management. The complaints started rolling in faster than tumbleweeds in a tornado, certified letters stacking up on my kitchen table like unpaid bills, excessive agricultural odors. Apparently, bull manure doesn't smell like potpourri, unsightly equipment storage, because tractors are such an eyesore, noise violations from livestock operations, bulls bellow, shocking discovery, all filed with Creek County by concerned residents, which translated to Linda plus whatever neighbors she'd bullied into submission. Pete kept me updated through scratchy phone calls to D.C. "Boss, this woman's documenting everything. She's got timestamps for our feeding schedule, measures dust clouds with some fancy gadget, even called the county claiming our cattle road violates setback requirements." Here's the kicker. Her house sits exactly 47 feet from our fence line. Our cattle road's been there since before the land rush of 1893, but suddenly it's a traffic hazard incompatible with residential character. I came home to 23 complaint letters and 1 memorable encounter at Morrison's Feed and Supply. The smell of grain and leather hit me like a warm hug from home. Then Linda cornered me by the horse vitamins, sticking out a manicured hand like we were at some charity gala. "You must be Mr. Thunderheart. I'm Linda Blackwood, Community Standards Director for Whispering Pines Estates." Her smile was all veneer and zero warmth. "We simply must discuss modernizing your operations to align with our neighborhood's vision." Behind her, old Jim Morrison pretended to organize salt blocks while clearly enjoying the free entertainment. The crunch of my boots on scattered grain echoed in the sudden quiet. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice calm as Sunday service, "this ranch has been here since before your neighborhood was even a thought in some developer's imagination." "Oh, I completely understand the historical significance," she chirped like she was explaining basic math to a child. "But times evolve. Property values, you understand. I have extensive experience with community compliance and valuable connections in county planning. I'm confident we can find accommodations that benefit everyone." The way she said accommodations made it crystal clear she meant surrender. 25 minutes she talked about community harmony and appropriate land use, while I bought cattle mineral and listened to her redesign my family's 134-year operation. Never once asked about our history, our legal standing, or whether we gave a damn about her bridge club schedule. Just assumed we'd roll over because Queen Linda had spoken. That night, I sat on the porch where 5 generations of Thunderhearts had watched storms roll across these hills. Lightning flickered on the horizon, and I could taste rain in the air, metallic and electric. The county had scheduled a neighborhood compatibility hearing based on Linda's complaints. She wanted our cattle road relocated, our equipment hidden from residential view, and our feeding schedule adjusted to accommodate her social calendar. I sipped bourbon and smiled. Storm's coming, all right. Linda Blackwood just didn't realize she'd picked a fight with the one man in America who could shut down her entire community association with a single phone call. But Linda wasn't waiting around. Within 72 hours, she'd transformed from lone complainer into commanding general of a 4-person army. Meet the Whispering Pines Property Enhancement Committee. Sounds official as hell, right? Her lieutenants, Marcus Kellerman, a retired insurance adjuster who pinched pennies like they were endangered species, and Patricia Hoffman, former Mesa City councilwoman who'd moved to Oklahoma to escape the exact bureaucracy she'd helped create. The 4th member was new arrival Robert Chen, a software consultant who seemed genuinely confused about how he'd gotten recruited. They held their inaugural war meeting at Linda's kitchen table, complete with color-coded folders and a PowerPoint presentation titled Agricultural Impact Mitigation Strategy. I'm dead serious. Pete's game cameras caught Marcus arriving with a laser pointer and portable projection screen like they were planning the invasion of Normandy instead of harassing a cattle ranch. Then came the beautiful twist of fate. Linda decided to research me online and discovered my federal position as senior investigator. Here's what made me nearly spit out my morning coffee. She completely misunderstood what I actually do. In her mind, I was some corrupt government flunky who protects agricultural interests and rubber stamps ranch violations. Perfect, she announced to her committee, her voice carrying across the evening air to Pete's listening post. He's obviously biased toward ranchers. We'll go straight over his head to Washington. I have contacts in municipal planning. If she only knew those contacts were about to become very interested in her community's federal compliance issues. While Linda plotted my professional downfall, I was quietly building her legal coffin. My attorney, Rebecca Silverwolf, ran a property search that revealed something absolutely delicious. I remembered my grandfather explaining these protections when I was 10, watching him argue with some long-forgotten developer. Agricultural conservation easements are permanent legal shields protecting existing farm operations from future residential complaints. Every noise complaint Linda filed was actually strengthening our legal position by documenting our historical activities. The principle is beautifully simple. You can't move next to a working ranch, then complain about ranching. The real treasure, Linda's previous addresses revealed a pattern clearer than cow tracks in mud. 4 states, 6 communities, identical neighbor disputes. I called her former neighbor in Marin County. Oh dear God, you got Linda? Mrs. Patterson laughed until she wheezed. She tried to get our mariachi band arrested for cultural noise violations. Called animal control on our chickens. Filed 19 complaints about our dog barking. We have a cat. Linda's campaign escalated beautifully. She hired a Tulsa law firm specializing in nuisance litigation. Fancy words for legal bullying. The smell of expensive trouble wafted through their demand letter like overpriced cologne. They threatened lawsuits for diminished property values and demanded immediate cessation of incompatible agricultural activities. Her documentation project reached obsessive levels that would make FBI surveillance teams jealous. Linda measured noise with a decibel meter during our 5:30 a.m. feeding routine, the electronic beeping echoing across the pasture like some demented alarm clock. She photographed every cow patty within 60 yards of her fence. Pete caught her standing on a stepladder, taking aerial photos of our equipment yard like she was conducting military reconnaissance. The community rallied faster than horses to fresh hay. Jim Morrison banned Linda from his feed store after she demanded to inspect our grain deliveries. Rosa Martinez, who runs the county's best Mexican restaurant, told Linda her dress code suggestions for customers could be filed under places where the sun doesn't shine. That woman, Rosa said, sliding coffee across the scarred Formica counter, complained about my tamales being too ethnically aromatic. In Oklahoma, the nerve could choke a longhorn. The sound of Rosa's coffee pot hitting the burner punctuated her disgust like a judge's gavel. Linda's legal team escalated with their first official demand: cease cattle operations within 250 yards of residential property, relocate equipment storage, establish sound barriers for livestock areas. Cost estimate $420,000 in ranch modifications to accommodate neighbors who'd moved next to an existing operation. She organized a Facebook campaign called Creek County Rural Modernization, posting professionally photographed evidence of our violations. Half her photos showed normal ranch activities that had been legal since before Oklahoma statehood. The other half documented our cattle doing revolutionary things like eating grass and existing while being cows. The entertainment peaked when Linda measured our fence height with a surveyor's rod, documenting potential sightline violations. Bertha, our most social heifer, wandered over to investigate this strange human behavior. Linda shrieked like she'd encountered a grizzly bear and ran for her Lexus, abandoning expensive equipment in her panic. "Boss," Pete called, chuckling, "I got video of our neighbor being terrorized by a 200-pound cow who just wanted to say howdy. This beats Netflix." The county scheduled our neighborhood compatibility hearing for the following month. Linda was confident her charts, graphs, and multimedia presentation would prove our ranch was an anachronistic nuisance incompatible with modern residential development. What she didn't know, I'd already talked with Samuel Baer, the county planning director and Dad's old army buddy. Samuel reviewed our agricultural easement and laughed until coffee shot out his nose. "Jake, this woman's complaints are legally meaningless. Your protections predate her development by over a century, but let her have her hearing. Might be educational for everyone involved." Linda thought she was building a case against us. Actually, she was documenting exactly why agricultural protections exist and why community associations can't override 134-year-old property rights. Linda's war machine shifted into overdrive. She launched Creek County Rural Modernization with a professional website featuring dramatic photos of our ranch operations. Cattle grazing apparently qualified as visual pollution in her world. She contacted Channel 6 about outdated agricultural exemptions harming innocent homeowners, and organized a petition drive demanding ranch modernization requirements. The woman was thorough, I'll grant her that. She discovered our property tax records and filed a complaint claiming the ranch was underassessed compared to residential properties. The smell of bureaucratic meddling hung in the air like diesel exhaust on a still morning. But here's where Linda's amateur detective work backfired spectacularly. She found out I owned mineral rights under a portion of her precious development, information that's public record if you know where to look. Most people don't understand that in Oklahoma, mineral rights often stay with original landowners even when surface land gets developed. Linda assumed this gave her ammunition against me, threatening to expose conflicts of interest to my federal supervisors. She had no clue that owning mineral rights actually strengthened my legal position, while her complaints were building a beautiful harassment case. Watching someone dig their own grave with such enthusiasm was almost painful. I responded with the patience my grandfather taught me when dealing with spooked cattle, calm, steady, and strategic. Rebecca Silverwolf began documenting Linda's harassment pattern for a potential restraining order. I continued my federal fraud investigation training through online modules, learning fascinating details about communities that failed to meet development compliance standards. The ranching community rallied like neighbors should. The Oklahoma Cattlemen's Association offered legal fund assistance, though we didn't need it yet. Creek County High School's FFA chapter wrote a letter supporting our operations. Those kids understand agriculture better than most adults. The Chamber of Commerce passed a resolution backing agricultural heritage, and 4 development residents privately apologized, distancing themselves from Linda's crusade. Linda's next move revealed just how disconnected she was from Oklahoma law. She attempted to get our ranch declared a public nuisance through city petition, apparently unaware that Creek County city limits ended 3 miles from our property. The public meeting where she presented her case to a confused city council became local legend. "Ma'am," the mayor explained gently, "we have no jurisdiction over county land. You might want to research municipal boundaries before filing petitions." The room's collective silence was audible, but Linda doubled down, claiming I was intimidating residents through threatening behavior. Her evidence security footage of cattle grazing peacefully in our pasture. Meanwhile, Rebecca's investigation uncovered something delicious. The development's builder had cut corners on environmental impact studies, and original permits required a 250-foot agricultural buffer that was never implemented. Linda's house sat 47 feet from our property line, violating original development conditions. Even better, the county inspector found multiple association violations throughout Whispering Pines estates. Unpermitted fences, drainage issues, and structures exceeding height restrictions. Turns out Linda's community had bigger legal problems than cow manure smells. The irony kept building like storm clouds. During one of my federal training sessions about consumer protection, I learned that community associations managing developments built with any federal funding or tax incentives fall under FTC oversight jurisdiction. A quick records check revealed Whispering Pines. Estates had received exactly those benefits during construction. Linda scheduled a community meeting at the development clubhouse to present evidence against our ranch, inviting local media without consulting other residents. The taste of impending justice was sweeter than Rosa's sopapillas. Pete's security cameras captured Linda's daily reconnaissance missions, photographing our cattle through fence slats, measuring dust levels with handheld devices, and documenting feeding schedules like she was preparing for war. The woman had turned harassment into a full-time occupation. "She's out there again," Pete reported one morning, taking pictures of the bulls. "I swear she's got more documentation on our cattle than the Department of Agriculture." The community meeting arrived with all the drama Linda could have hoped for, just not the kind she expected. 18 residents attended, mostly out of curiosity rather than support. Linda presented her slideshow with dramatic music and professional graphics detailing every alleged violation our 134-year-old ranch committed against her 87-day-old sensibilities. Then I arrived, uninvited but perfectly within my rights as a county resident. Linda's face cycled through surprise, anger, and panic as I calmly addressed each complaint with documented facts and legal precedents. "Mrs. Blackwood," I said, standing near the back of the room, "you're asking a 134-year-old ranch to change operations for a development built 87 days ago. That's like moving next to an airport and complaining about airplane noise." Several residents asked pointed questions about Linda's previous neighbor disputes. Her support evaporated faster than morning dew in August heat. The county planning office announced a comprehensive review of the development's permit compliance, triggered by all those complaints Linda had filed. Sometimes the best revenge is letting someone hang themselves with their own rope. Linda realized her media strategy had backfired, her legal threats were toothless, and her community was turning against her. But like a wounded animal, that's when she became most dangerous. The real fun was just beginning. Linda's desperation led her to Channel 6's investigative team with a story pitch that would make Hollywood screenwriters envious. Federal employee abuses power to intimidate neighbors. She provided edited footage of our ranch operations, emphasizing dust clouds and morning feeding noise, claiming to represent dozens of affected families in her fight against government corruption. The smell of her own panic must have been overwhelming because Linda was making rookie mistakes left and right. Here's where her media gambit exploded in her face like a defective firework. Reporter Maria Santos started investigating, but instead of focusing on ranch violations, she discovered Linda's trail of neighbor disputes across 4 states. The story shifted from problem rancher terrorizes development to problem neighbor targets longtime agricultural operation. Santos found building permit violations throughout Whispering Pines, documented Linda's pattern of harassment complaints, and interviewed former neighbors who painted a picture of someone who turned conflict into a career. When she called requesting an interview, I realized this was my chance to educate people about a bigger problem. I explained my actual federal role, community association fraud investigation, not ranch protection, and provided documentation of Linda's escalating harassment. The timing was perfect. I mentioned my upcoming testimony to a congressional subcommittee about community association, accountability, and federal oversight reform. Linda's response was pure panic. Realizing her media strategy had backfired spectacularly, she attempted damage control by claiming she was protecting community standards against government overreach. She organized an emergency association board meeting to change development rules and proposed a special assessment to fund legal action against our ranch. The community meeting turned into a masterclass in how not to win friends and influence people. Linda presented her slideshow of ranch violations with all the drama of a murder trial, complete with ominous background music and red arrows pointing at our cattle like they were criminal evidence. I showed up uninvited, perfectly legal for any county resident, and calmly dismantled every claim with facts and documentation. When Linda accused our cattle of creating excessive noise pollution, I pointed out that her own decibel readings showed levels lower than typical suburban lawnmowers. "Mrs. Blackwood," I said, the room silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. "According to your own measurements, our cattle register at 42 decibels during feeding time. Your neighbor's leaf blower hits 75 decibels every Saturday morning." Several residents started asking uncomfortable questions about Linda's previous legal disputes. Turns out people don't appreciate being misled into potential litigation that could cost them thousands in special assessments. Meanwhile, my investigation into development compliance was revealing fascinating details. Rebecca discovered that when the original builder went bankrupt, all permit obligations transferred to the community association. That included $420,000 in unfulfilled environmental compliance work that Linda's board was legally responsible for completing. The Developments Association lacked legal standing to challenge our operations anyway. The original builder had included protective clauses for adjacent agricultural use, standard practice when building near existing farms. Linda's proposed special assessment required 80% resident approval, and support was evaporating faster than puddles in July heat. My federal training had taught me that many community associations fail to understand their ongoing legal obligations from original development permits. When builders cut corners or go bankrupt, homeowners inherit problems they never knew existed. It's a nationwide issue costing communities millions annually. Linda's allies began jumping ship like rats from a sinking vessel. Marcus Kellerman publicly withdrew from her property enhancement committee after learning about agricultural easements and his potential liability for permit violations. Patricia Hoffman quietly told neighbors she'd been misled about legal complexities and was moving back to Arizona. Robert Chen had already distanced himself after the first meeting, later admitting he'd thought they were planning a neighborhood barbecue. The entertainment reached peak absurdity when Linda attempted to measure our fence height with a surveyor's rod, documenting potential sightline violations. Our protective mother cow Dolly had recently calved and wasn't tolerating strangers near her baby. Linda's shriek could probably be heard in the next county as she fled, leaving expensive equipment scattered in the dirt. "Boss," Pete called, barely containing his laughter, "that woman just got chased off by a mama cow protecting her calf. Even our livestock thinks she's a problem." Maria Santos's preliminary article hit the local paper like a bombshell. Development faces environmental compliance crisis. The piece detailed permit violations, financial mismanagement, and legal obligations that could bankrupt individual homeowners through special assessments. Linda realized her complaints had triggered the exact investigation that threatened her own property value and financial stability. Every noise violation she'd documented created evidence supporting our ranch's historical operations. Every agency she'd contacted was now scrutinizing her community's compliance failures. The county planning office announced an accelerated review of development permits triggered by the volume of complaints Linda had filed. Environmental agencies were asking questions about drainage, sound barriers, and buffer zones that should have been completed years ago. Linda had spent months trying to prove our ranch was incompatible with residential development. Instead, she documented exactly why agricultural protections exist and demonstrated that her development was the real problem. The trap had been set by her own hand. She just didn't realize she was standing in it. Rebecca's property search hit the jackpot on a Wednesday morning that changed everything. I was reviewing Federal Community Association compliance regulations over coffee when she called with news that made me nearly choke on my first sip. "Jake, you need to see this immediately. The development builder never filed the required agricultural impact mitigation plan." The document spread across her walnut conference table told a story better than any fiction. Whispering Pines. Estates' approval was conditional. They were supposed to establish a 250-foot buffer zone, install sound barriers, and complete environmental compliance work estimated at $420,000. The builder went bankrupt before fulfilling any requirements, legally transferring all obligations to the community association. Linda's board was now responsible for every single compliance cost the original builder had dodged. The power dynamic shifted like tectonic plates. Every noise complaint Linda had filed created documentation proving our ranch's pre-existing rights. Every dust measurement she'd taken supported our historical operations. Every agency she'd contacted was now investigating why her community hadn't met legal requirements. The irony was delicious enough to taste. In my federal training, I'd learned about developments that received tax incentives or federal funding, like Whispering Pines Estates, which automatically fall under FTC oversight jurisdiction. Linda had been harassing the one person in America with authority to investigate her community's regulatory failures. Rebecca's investigation revealed something even more damaging. Linda's house specifically violated setback requirements from the original permits. She'd built 47 feet from our property line when regulations required 250 feet. Her dream home was technically an illegal structure. "This gets better," Rebecca continued, sliding another document across the table. "The development's stormwater management system relies on natural drainage through your ranch property. The original permits acknowledge this dependency. Restricting your operations could cause flooding throughout their community." Linda's vulnerability was complete. Property values she claimed to protect would crater if county enforcement action required compliance work. The special assessment to fund necessary improvements would be approximately $15,000 per household, money her community couldn't afford, and she definitely couldn't pay. I remembered my grandfather's advice about dealing with aggressive neighbors. Sometimes the best defense is letting folks tie their own noose. Linda had spent months creating documentation that proved our ranch was beneficial to the area while her development was the real problem. The federal angle made it even sweeter. As senior investigator, I had authority to examine community associations that failed to meet development obligations. I could recommend state intervention if communities couldn't address permit violations. My upcoming congressional testimony could feature Whispering Pines Estates as a perfect example of association accountability failures. Rebecca pulled out the final piece of evidence: financial records showing the Developments Association had failed to file required annual reports for 3 consecutive years. In federal oversight terms, they were operating as an unregulated entity while managing a development built with public tax incentives. "Linda doesn't understand what she's unleashed," Rebecca said, organizing the documents into neat stacks. "Every complaint she filed helps us. She's documented why your ranch should stay exactly as it is while proving her community violated multiple regulations." The beautiful truth crystallized like morning frost. I didn't need to fight Linda directly. Her own actions would force her community to address real problems while leaving our ranch protected by law. She'd become the architect of her own destruction. Linda thought she was David fighting Goliath. Actually, she was Goliath falling on her own sword while David watched from a safe distance. The taste of justice was sweeter than Rosa's flan, and twice as satisfying. Linda's harassment campaign had triggered investigations that would either bankrupt her community or force them to spend hundreds of thousands fixing problems they'd ignored for years. All I had to do was continue normal ranch operations while Linda's house of cards collapsed under the weight of her own complaints. Time to assemble the cavalry. Rebecca Silverwolf spread legal documents across her conference table like a general planning a military campaign. Pete Crowfeather arrived with 45 years of ranch operation records, proving our historical precedents down to the day we first drove cattle down that disputed road. Rosa Martinez offered her restaurant as neutral meeting ground and promised the best coffee in 3 counties to fuel our strategy sessions. Samuel Baer from County Planning brought the bureaucratic firepower, explaining how permit enforcement worked and agreeing to accelerate the development's compliance review. Channel 6's Maria Santos wanted exclusive access to our story as it unfolded. The woman smelled a regional Emmy in the making. Our 3-pronged strategy emerged over Rosa's legendary carne guisada and strong black coffee that could wake the dead. The legal track was Rebecca's domain. We'd file a countercomplaint against the development for permit violations, request county enforcement of original development conditions, and prepare documentation for my potential restraining order against Linda. As backup, I'd ready a Federal Association compliance investigation, the nuclear option that could shut down their entire community governance. Rebecca's research had revealed something fascinating about agricultural conservation easements that I'd learned from my grandfather, but never fully appreciated. These protections aren't just suggestions, they're permanent legal shields that run with the land forever. When developers build near existing ranches, they're acknowledging that agricultural activities take precedence. You can't buy property next to a working ranch, then demand it stop working. The community track required more finesse. I coordinated with the Cattlemen's Association to show unified support at the upcoming county meeting. We arranged testimonials from longtime residents about our ranch's community value, people who remembered my father helping during the '99 ice storm and my grandfather donating land for the volunteer fire station. Local businesses were already rallying. Jim Morrison documented how Linda's complaints affected his feed store customers. Dr. Maria Redhorse, our veterinarian, prepared statements about our exemplary animal care standards. Even the postmaster offered to testify about our road safety record, no mail delivery incidents in 41 years. We planned Heritage Day at the ranch, showcasing our historical significance to the community. The smell of barbecue smoke and the sound of fiddle music would demonstrate what authentic Western heritage actually meant, not Linda's sanitized suburban fantasy. The federal track was my specialty. During my Washington training, I'd learned that developments receiving any federal funding or tax incentives automatically qualify for FTC oversight review. Whispering Pines estates had received exactly those benefits, making them subject to federal accountability standards they'd been ignoring for years. I gathered data on association compliance failures for my congressional subcommittee testimony, using our local situation as a case study in development oversight problems. The timing was perfect. Legislators were drafting stronger community association accountability measures, and real-world examples carried more weight than theoretical proposals. My federal colleagues were fascinated by the agricultural angle. Many rural communities faced similar pressures from suburban expansion, and our case could establish precedents protecting agricultural operations nationwide. The economic analysis was compelling. Our ranch provided $210,000 annually in local economic activity through feed, veterinary, and equipment purchases. Pete's security footage became crucial evidence. We had documented proof of Linda's daily harassment, measuring fence lines at dawn, photographing cattle through slats, following our supply trucks, and conducting what could only be described as agricultural surveillance. The woman had turned neighbor complaints into a full-time obsession. Environmental impact assessments revealed the beautiful irony. Our ranch operations actually improved local air quality and soil stability compared to intensive residential development. The development's stormwater system depended on natural drainage through our property. Original permits acknowledged this relationship, making our operations essential to their community's environmental compliance. During one strategy session at Rosa's, the pieces clicked together like a well-oiled machine. Every aggressive move Linda made created more documentation of harassment. Her complaints to multiple agencies had accelerated regulatory review processes. Community support was solidifying as her tactics became increasingly extreme. The perfect storm was brewing. County planning would address development permit compliance at month's end. Federal Association oversight had announced compliance review tours in our region. The local newspaper planned a feature story on agricultural heritage for the county's 145th anniversary. Maria Santos's investigative piece was scheduled for Sweeps Week, guaranteeing maximum viewership. Rebecca organized our legal documents with military precision. Pete prepared historical ranch operation demonstrations for the Heritage Day event. Rosa coordinated community support logistics. Samuel scheduled the crucial county meeting. Maria Santos confirmed her camera crew's availability. I received the call that made everything perfect. The congressional subcommittee requesting my testimony about community association oversight failures, with specific interest in using local case studies. Linda's harassment campaign had inadvertently provided me with a national platform to address systemic problems affecting rural communities across America. The taste of impending victory was sweeter than Rosa's famous tres leches cake. Linda thought she was fighting a local rancher. She was actually battling federal housing policy, state agricultural protections, county planning authority, and community solidarity. All we had to do was let her keep digging while we prepared to fill in the hole. Linda's desperation reached new levels of creative destruction. She placed anonymous calls to the state veterinarian claiming livestock abuse, apparently believing that well-fed cattle in clean pastures constituted animal cruelty. She contacted the IRS suggesting our ranch operations were hobby farming tax fraud, a laughable claim considering our consistent profitability and proper documentation spanning 5 generations. The woman's paranoia drove her to offer cash payments to our seasonal workers, trying to recruit them as informants. Pete caught wind of this through his cousin Miguel, who worked summer hay crews, and reported Linda approaching him with $75 and questions about our illegal activities. She wanted to know if we dumped chemicals in the creek or mistreated animals, Miguel told Pete, shaking his head. I told her the only thing we dump is love on those cattle, and she looked at me like I was speaking Martian. Her complaints grew increasingly bizarre. Linda filed reports with the Postal Service about unsafe ranch road conditions affecting mail delivery, the same road our mail carrier had used safely for 41 years. She measured dust particles with handheld devices, documenting air quality violations that were actually just Oklahoma wind-blowing Oklahoma dirt. The mini-twist came when Linda's husband cracked under financial pressure. Dave Blackwood had been hiding their true situation from his wife, but the mounting legal costs and her escalating obsession forced a confession that Pete's security cameras captured through their open kitchen window. Linda, we're broke. Dave's voice carried across the evening air. We owe $127,000 in California back taxes, liens, and legal settlements. We moved here to avoid wage garnishment. We can't afford to lose house value or pay association assessments. You have to stop this madness. But Linda was too deep in her crusade to quit. Like a gambler doubling down on bad bets, she'd invested too much pride to walk away now. My federal investigation accelerated with discoveries that made Linda's complaints look like child's play. The association compliance review revealed $156,000 in unaccounted administrative expenses over 4 years. The previous board president, before Linda's involvement, appeared to have embezzled funds meant for infrastructure maintenance. This financial mismanagement meant the association lacked resources to address permit violations even if they wanted to comply. They were functionally bankrupt while facing hundreds of thousands in required compliance costs. Linda's media blitz continued backfiring spectacularly. She appeared on KWGS Talk Radio, contradicting her previous statements about our ranch timeline. When she claimed we'd moved in after the development, host Jennifer Blackbear fact-checked her live using the county property database. Ma'am, Blackbear said, the sound of rustling papers audible over the airwaves. These records show Thunder Creek Ranch was established in 1889. Your development was approved in 2024. That's a difference of about 135 years. Callers overwhelmingly supported our ranch, sharing their own community association horror stories. The taste of public vindication was sweeter than morning coffee on a cold day. Community pressure mounted like storm clouds before a tornado. Development residents received county notices about permit violations and potential special assessments. Their insurance company threatened coverage cancellation due to development noncompliance. 5 families put houses on the market rather than face financial ruin. The association board called an emergency meeting to discuss removing Linda from leadership positions. Even her most loyal supporters were abandoning ship as the legal and financial consequences became clear. Meanwhile, I maintained strategic silence, continuing normal ranch operations while Linda created chaos around herself. My federal training had taught me that the best way to handle unstable situations is through calm consistency. Document everything. Respond factually when contacted, but never escalate unnecessarily. Environmental consultants delivered reports that destroyed Linda's remaining arguments. Our ranch operations actually improved local water table management through natural drainage patterns. The development stormwater system relied on this drainage flowing through our property, a dependency acknowledged in original development permits. Removing or restricting our operations could cause flooding throughout the development during heavy rains. Linda's complaints threatened the very infrastructure her community depended on for basic safety. Her former allies jumped ship faster than rats from a burning barn. Marcus Kellerman publicly resigned from the Property Enhancement Committee, citing concerns about legal liability and factual inaccuracies in their campaign. Patricia Hoffman moved back to Arizona, telling neighbors she was tired of manufactured drama and wanted to escape before special assessments hit. Only one resident still supported Linda, a recent arrival who hadn't researched the legal complexities and would soon discover the financial implications of her loyalty. Linda's harassment escalated to truly dangerous levels. She blocked our supply truck at the development entrance, demanding to inspect cargo like some self-appointed customs agent. She took photographs through ranch windows with telephoto L.